So, grab a seat. So Ricardo Frechou is the CEO and founder of Infocasas. Yeah, grab this one, please. In Uruguay, and then as of a month ago, a bit less, fresh hot off the press. He's now in charge of all of Frontier Digital Ventures assets in Latin America, and he's going to tell you a bit more about that in a second. And Neve is the founder and CEO of Net Ventures, which invests in multiple different businesses in emerging markets. Yeah. And we'll talk about what you're doing shortly. So, Ricardo, perhaps you want to do a bit more of an introduction, especially about what this new role of yours is.
Yes, thank you, Simon. Thank you for the invitation. I'm a co-founder of Infocasas. It's a real estate portal that launched in Uruguay. Then we went to Paraguay, Bolivia, and Peru. In 2017, we have an investment of Frontier Digital Ventures. It's an ASX-listed company. They purchased in 2017, 2019, 2021 was the exit. Simon gave me an advice, get the money and run. I tried to do that, but I couldn't. So I was ending my deal December this year, and they invited me they have also operations in Chile, Colombia, and Central America. So they invited me to get the position of this new entity would be LATAM. And the idea is try to consolidate all the assets and try to go to an IPO for 2025.
Okay. And so what are the names of the assets?
So it's Yapo in Chile, it's a horizontal marketplace, it's Finca Raíz in Colombia, it's a real estate vertical, E24 in Central America, it's also a horizontal, and Infocasas.
Okay. So a broad range of businesses covering 6 or 7 markets, I would think.
Yeah, nearly 10.
Nearly 10 markets. And can you tell us the amount of revenue across those markets?
Yes. So on a consolidated revenue, we're going to end the year somewhere around $32 million US dollars. Obviously now getting also in the conversation, we have all these exchange rates that also we have in local currency. We get our numbers in US dollars, so that's also in local currency we have growth much higher than what appears in US dollars. And we got like consolidated 165 million leads per year. So we got nearly 4 million clients. So it's huge. And the idea also is try to invite LATAM assets that wanna, it's a good timing to see if there's opportunity to do some M&A consolidations and try to build something together. So in these next 3 years, it's also part of the story, trying to get the experience of these emerging markets that you have different stories, different cultures, political issues everywhere, exchange currencies. So it's going to be a nice opportunity for the next years.
Okay, so we're going to dive a bit deeper into your businesses in a second. Ben, do you want to talk about a bit what Net Ventures does, the sort of markets you invest in, and the types of businesses that you're investing in?
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Simon. So my background is running businesses in emerging markets. That was primarily Dot Property, which I exited in 2016 to Matula, and then decided to set up our own shop, building businesses in emerging markets. We do both property and automotive. We've tested some products in the UK, so we do have some assets in Western markets. But predominantly we're in Middle East and Asia with a couple of arm's length deals in South America. We invest in or build online property agencies rather than portals at the moment. And we're growing quickly in Thailand and Dubai. And we've got automotive businesses, car subscription businesses in Singapore, Thailand, and Dubai, and the UK.
Okay. So first question to you then is, why invest in these markets versus, you've got some in the UK, but then you've got all these investments in these emerging markets. What is so attractive about them?
I think the main thing is the opportunity that you can have to be first to market. So in the UK, so we run the same business model in the UK as we do in Singapore and Thailand. And within weeks of launching in the UK, there's another 15, 20 identical businesses, some of which are far better funded than you, and have a better history of relationships and what have you in that market. I think in emerging markets, the attractiveness of it is the fact that it's quite difficult to do business. So if you learn how to do business in these markets and you've got your connections and your access to capital and backers in these markets, then it makes sense that you repeat the process and continue to evolve businesses in those markets. Okay. So not as much competition.
Okay. So Ricardo, when you think about, because you built InfoCasas, right, from the sort of the first line of code, what have been what was attractive to you about the markets that you operate in? And InfoCasas, I think, is in Uruguay, Paraguay,
Bolivia and Peru.
Bolivia and Peru. And that's a transaction model or a transaction and a portal model?
So first of all, it's interesting because we share experience regarding emerging markets. When Uruguay is a really small country. We are 3.3 million people in the country. We don't grow if you see the numbers. So you got to be creative. And what you just mentioned about emerging markets, suddenly we realized that these big companies like Mercado Libre, OLX, whatever, they refer to Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, and Peru as ROLA, R-O-L-A, rest of Latin America. So basically, it was like the rest of Latin America. We said, look, there's more than 50 million people here. No, this is quite an opportunity. We came from a country from 3 million. So suddenly realized that we could grow there. And when you start with trying, from a really small market, you got to be creative. So we really went deep into transactions since 2017. We started trying a lot of things that we realized that big companies on other markets couldn't take the risk to move to transactions, to have your, we are classified, agents pay you, suddenly you are in the same business as agents. So we started pure transactions in the primary market.
Okay, and then so it's attractive because A, the big players were forgetting about those markets, and B, because you're going after the transaction from the first day.
Exactly. And we could build a model, a process in primary market that we realized we could scale. You could be a little bit more creative in emerging markets. You don't have all the data protection that you have, for example, here in Europe, but that's give you a little bit more margin to try new or different things. So we've moved there, and we could scale and grow.
Okay. So then, as you're scaling the businesses and operating across all these markets, what have been the key challenges that an emerging market creates different from an established market? What are the 2 or 3 things that have been challenges you've had to overcome?
I think first of all is the cultural thing. We are neighbor countries, whatever, but it's totally different culture. The politics. I know we just heard a strong presentation about Ukraine. Obviously, that's war. It's not war in our countries, but the political crisis is incredible. Suddenly, you are a left-wing government, right-wing government. Everything changes. All the rules changes. Suddenly it's like you're always living like that in the limit. It's like I don't know. I imagine you all heard about Argentina. It's crazy. Well, imagine that in all the markets. So you gotta understand that you can scale, but you also gotta be flexible with the local culture and adapting locally. Okay.
Do you find the same sort of issues in the markets you operate in? Because you said you took the same model and applied it to different markets. Has it been simple just to photocopy, or have you really had to customize as you go?
It seems like we had loads of challenges until hearing that last presentation, and that's like the most extreme, isn't it? But exactly the same. I think the challenges are apparent in any of these markets with governments, with changes, with coups and what have you going on. But at the same time, going back to the advantages, the growth in wealth of the main population is so attractive. And I think as it grows further or increases further, then those risks associated become less because the middle classes speak, or the middle to working classes speak louder as they become wealthier and better educated. So I think that's what's so attractive, because they are going to catch up with the West. And I can't speak for South America, but particularly in Asia, the work ethics, and there's other advantages over there to launching in those businesses over a Western market.
Can we please bring up the questions so people can participate in the asking questions and participate in the conversation? Ricardo, I'm curious about, because you've got this really transaction-driven model, and we've chatted many times about this. When you're building out a transaction model, and you heard the presentations today and you know, the various strategies people can adopt, what have been the 2 or 3 lessons you've learned, big lessons you've learned as you've rolled out transaction models in these markets?
So first of all, that in Uruguay we had this classified as #1 in Portal, and if you ask me now, we were too slowly or scared of pushing harder the fight with brokers or agents, you know. Nothing happened at the end of the day. There was a lot of noise, emails, I'm going to get down on the platform, you know, everyone was complaining. But we tried to do with messages that, well, it's primary market, agents really don't work there, or there's not the primary source of revenue. So we were all this scared, and then you realize that we pushed, we are the #1 in transactions regarding primary market, nothing happened, and we tried then to give these also tools to agents or brokers so they can grow in this market with us, so be generous. But first of all, it's like we define revenue kills everything. If someone came with an idea, makes revenue, yes, doesn't make revenue, goes back. So I would try to push a little bit harder and faster than what we did.
Okay. And have you had similar experiences?
Just ask Antonio.
The experience, I mean, if you think about as you roll out your transaction models, right, has it been easy, or have you had you know, the same sort of lessons?
I would say every market has its challenges. The UK is not easy to operate a subscription business in or a transaction business in, and it's certainly not as fruitful in terms of commissions. So in Thailand we can get 5% on a resale unit versus fighting with Savills over 1% in the UK. So and what we have to pay our staff in those markets is less than we'd have to pay in the UK. So, you know, there are challenges, but there are challenges in every business. So I think, again, going back to when you get experience and understand the culture and running a business in that country, then for me it's no different running a business in Southeast Asia than the UK.
So the questions come up here for you, Ricardo. How do you secure the transaction without the, you know, how do you make sure you get paid? I'll translate it. Without the seller, it says crossing you here, but you know, basically screwing you in the process.
So this question, we had it many times. Every agent, broker, developer, whatever, will try to skip you. Nobody likes to, you know, even developers or agents. If we work directly to developers, they will try to skip you. The end game solution is sometimes you have advantage to the market and disadvantage. The advantage is there's no formal agents, brokers, so it's no license. You can go and sell properties, so that's what we did. The disadvantage is it's not so regulated, so you don't know if that lead converted, purchased a property, whatever. So what happened is try to build a relationship. At the beginning, we're skipped. Developers tried to cut us commission. Then they realized we were performing better. At the end of the day, Infocasas made them more money. They made them more sales. We had this, you know, performance that they realized was good, and when you start building a relationship, they start to cut less off the payments or the commissions. We know they skip us. We try to audit the leads. For example, yesterday we were chatting about Infocasas. If when we processes the lead, whatever, send it to the developer, we say, hey, if you purchase a property, you have a price, TB, depends on the amount, no TB, car, travel, whatever you can imagine. So when they come and say, hey, I want to collect my price, that means they purchase a property, or we audit the lead like with a survey. So we try to do some tools. You get cut off. Obviously, people want to try to cut off, but at the end of the day, building the relationship is the best.
I want to talk a bit about Lazudi, one of your investments that's operating in the Thailand market. The Thailand market is quite interesting because there's a number of players. There's Vazwaz, Lazudi, Property Scout, and others. How do you compete in that market, or you don't think about it as competition because you're going after the transaction? How do you think about that?
I mean, at the moment, the market's so strong that we all seem to be growing at a ridiculous rate. So we haven't had to consider that. What we do try and do ourselves, I can't speak for the others, is just we've brought in local area experts that have that 5 to 10, maybe even more years of experience in the region. And we try and provide, because we're all fighting for the buyers, because it's a buyer-led market, we try and make sure that we're front of mind and we're answering calls within 30 seconds, because Vaz will do it within 45 and things like that. So it's all speed and reaction and then controlling the activity of our agents. But yeah, I mean, we all have our own marketing methods. None of us are portals. We're all online agents. And the portals are quite clear. They wouldn't let you advertise if you were a portal, obviously, because you'd be competing with them. So we do all advertise in the same places. The other thing we've got to do is build seller relationships, and none of us discount commissions to the sellers. It's all pretty standard, but it's a non-exclusive market. So if you action leads in quick time, you'll normally get hold of that buyer.
There's interesting, and it's a related question, is how do you identify the types of leaders you need for these opportunities, these local leaders? How do you find them, right? Because you need someone who understands what you're trying to do, operate in, maybe comes from a traditional real estate agency background, or maybe they don't. Yeah. How do you find leaders in these markets?
So we work with those predominantly from traditional that are scared of the technology coming in to disrupt their market. And we bring that technology as our piece of the puzzle for them, so we support them. So if we have acquired a couple of small agencies in local markets. They've got 15, 20 years of experience in that market. We remove their overhead of administration, marketing, and we centralise all that in our Bangkok office and technology. We go out there and we generate the leads. We then concierge service the leads in a central office so that those people, rather than having to worry about running a whole business in their local market, they're selling properties and looking after their associate agents, and that is it. So it's worked. An example would be the first acquisition we made, which was an ex-Century 21 franchise. Last year, earned in the region of 4 times more working with us than he had as a franchisee on his own, with what he said was 1/10 of the stress, because he didn't have to consider all the rest of the business. So that's how we add value to our agents.
And what about your market, Ricardo, or markets? Because you've got, Latin America is massive. You've got lots of markets. How do you find the local leaders who understand the business the way you understand it and can help drive it forward to that same culture?
First of all, we try to be a company that bases its growth on performance and scale. So we try to go to the average markets. So first of all, if it's for us, an outlier is someone in the luxury market or the low income properties. So we cut them off and see the average who really performs well. So we try to stick to there because we could build a process around the average middle market. And in those processes where you can scale. So we try to see who is performing well, and then we try to work there. Okay.
So a question for you, Ben. Do your businesses leverage Google, Meta, WhatsApp, these non-traditional advertising channels to get growth in the markets? How do you think about accessing those channels, which are highly popular in the Southeast Asian markets?
Yeah, social media most definitely. Google more expensively, but you have to have campaigns probably on primary sales only rather than resales, just because of the way it is, and it's non-exclusive. But I still think dot property is probably our best source of leads that turn into transactions. So the property portals are really relevant to us as well. One of the tricky things in Southeast Asia versus the UK or Australia, where you've got a dominant or 2 dominant portals, anyone can sell a property in those markets. If you get the listing and you publish it on a portal, if it's priced correctly, it will sell because you've got everyone's eyes that's in the market for property. In Asia, I do think you have to leverage these other sources of eyeballs, if you like, because not everyone looks at dot property or DD Property or the other portals in the area. There's not one dominant player. So yes, you do have to leverage these other sources of leads.
So it's another characteristic of emerging markets is fragmentation. Fragmentation at the agent level, fragmentation at the marketing level, a relatively poorly structured market. So there's no like central, national association or realtors, etc. And going. So another question's come up, and I'll ask this for Ricardo. For you, how do you deal with registering buyers in the transaction model?
Sorry, I didn't get one.
How do you deal with registering of the buyer? How do you deal with making sure that you know who the buyer is in that transaction model?
Okay, regarding the lead, so we've been trying to verticalize all the process. So now we have our own agents, we call hybrid agents or outsourced agents. So first of all, we try to get as much information purely automated as we can. And it's quite simple. I know it's maybe sounds like techie, whatever, but it's try to get a survey, WhatsApp, conversation, something, getting the information and getting the how he interact with our portal. For example, when he started searching, what type of properties. For example, if someone searches in, I don't know, a condo, a farm, a house, whatever, it's probably just dreaming. But the behavior on the portal, then we can interact with the communication, and then our agent, or when we send it to the developer, it's a final part of the process. One of the things that we really try to do is we realize that when we verticalize as much as we can, we perform better. I don't know if some agents don't wanna complete the full process, or I don't know why, but we try to push and we perform better than the market.
Okay, Ben, you got some you got all these investments and operations. Some you're growing, some you've invested in through Southeast Asia. Some operating in similar businesses. How much knowledge sharing and technology sharing is done between the businesses to allow them all to grow much faster?
Not enough, probably. So that's something that we're working on. But and they are different markets, different plays. I mean, we encourage our CEOs to talk to one another. And certainly in the automotive businesses, they're very similar business models, just in different markets. They all get the same issues. On the property side, not so much, because they're not identical businesses. But yeah, it's something that we're having our first CEO convention type week in the Middle East in January. So that's the first time we're going to spend a week together and have speed dating of CEOs, if you like, so they can all spend an hour together and just get to know each other and hopefully work together.
How do you, and an interesting question is because when you look at investments in emerging markets, unless you've got scale, you might have an asset that's doing okay, but it's illiquid, right? No one's ever going to buy it. How do you ensure you don't end up being a fund of a lot of okay, illiquid assets? Tough question, I'm sorry, but I think it's an interesting one to think about.
It is an interesting one, and it's something that we think about a lot. But I think our fundamentals are that we've got to build good businesses with good people that eventually turn out to profit sooner rather than later, hopefully. And if we do that, then if we have to hold on to the profit for as long as we have to hold on to, then it's not a negative. And if we build it into a sizable enough business, then it would attract buyers anyway. So if the business is good and the fundamentals are good, the unit economics are good, then we think we can, well, our experience is that buyers will come.
Okay. What about FTV Latin America? I mean, you've got a chunk of assets now. You've got to think about how to extract value cross assets, and then are you then thinking about new acquisitions and moving into other markets?
Well, exactly what you just asked is what we're trying. Some of the assets are not growing at double digits. So part of the consolidation is try, for example, to build efficiency, share tools, purchase tools together, with all these outsourced services we use. Then try to get some experiences from one country to the other one. And you can do that if you have one end game altogether, Because just this quick one, FDB already owned 100% of every asset in South America, but they didn't share any expertise. It just was a phone call experience, whatever, but there was no really working on something together because everybody fought for the local market or local company. So now you have all together we have like one objective that is try to do an IPO in 2025. Suddenly that is a game changer because at the end of the day it's going to be left pocket, right pocket also for the GM of the local entity because he will be involved on this IPO objective. So we're trying to change that and say, look, don't think locally. Yes, you have to perform, but also try to think as a team all together in Latam.
Okay. And you're looking to bring in new businesses?
Yes, the idea is try to bring new businesses, so grow organically, and some do also an M&A, and yeah, we are seeking that.
Okay. And how are you going to fund the M&A?
It's been 2 weeks. Give me a little bit more time to see how we're going to fund it.
I'll ask you next week around that. Okay, one last question is, do you think it's easier to launch these transaction-type businesses into emerging markets versus the established markets? The question's sort of been up here for a little bit, but I think it's quite an interesting one. Based on all the experience you've had, you know, and what you know of established markets or emerging markets, would you rather launch it, would you rather be like a right move trying to launch one of these businesses, or would you rather be launching into an emerging market? Ben, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think if I had to choose, I'd choose, well, I have done, I've chosen emerging markets most of the time just because slightly more difficult, but the size of the prize, I think, is bigger because it's more difficult. Less competition and more exciting. So I'd choose emerging markets every time.
I think the big issue is when you're launching a transactional that is different from classified, that you need to be careful or be aware of the cash flow. All these transactions, commissions in real estate, you do all the spending today, you get the commission collected in, depending on the market, 3, 6, or up to 9 months. So you got to be really careful about cash flows that can be really critical.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We're coming to the end of the day. It's been a long day, a long half day. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and experiences. And I would suggest chatting to these guys about transaction-based businesses. And they've got a lot of experience, a lot of good stories. Ricardo's going to come back to a panel session on the last day to talk more in detail about what it takes to build one of these transaction businesses, and lots of experience to share. So thank you very much for taking the time to share your thoughts today about the challenges and opportunities of emerging markets.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for the first day. I hope this has been useful. Some interesting